Bonjour. Haven't seen you guys in a minute. Time to catch up. SpaceX's launch cadence has come to a screeching halt following a Stage 2 failure. Blue Origin is gearing up to integrate New Glenn flight hardware, and details about Stoke's presence at LC-14 for its first fully reusable rocket. I'm Max Evans for NSF, and join us today for this month's Space Coast Flyover. As usual, I won't be alone in this one, as we have Alex here in Florida visiting the Space Coast for the first time, along with Adrian, who will be joining us from the studio. First and foremost, let's go ahead and check out SpaceX's Roberts Road facility to check on some updates from what we've seen from our last flyover. If you've been keeping up with our Starbase updates, you're probably well aware that SpaceX is in the process of building a second Starship launch tower in South Texas. The segments for that tower were built right here in Florida at SpaceX's Roberts Road facility, and the last of them were moved to Starbase right in between this flyover and our last one. Kind of shows you how long it's been. The hardware involved in this move were tower sections number 4 and 5, as well as the chopstick arms and their carriage system. No more Starship tower hardware seems to be remaining at Roberts Road, apart from the old ship QD. This arm has been there even before these tower sections were put together, because it was originally meant for the Starship facility here at LC-39A. However, with the impending changes planned for Starship and its respective launch pads, this quick disconnect arm may be heavily out of date. So who knows at this point if it'll even be used at all? While no more Starship tower hardware can be seen here, given what we know about SpaceX's future plans for LC-39A, maybe we shouldn't be too surprised if some new construction starts to pop up in the next few months. You'll understand why once we hear from Alex. One thing we noticed in particular that we noticed on this flyover was that SpaceX has finally put a proper parking lot right next to Hangar X2. This consolidation is now more clear than ever. In the last couple of months since our last flyover, we've seen signs that point to SpaceX already using Hangar X2 for Dragon processing. For example, on May 14th, we saw a flight-proven cargo Dragon capsule passing by our Space Coast Live cameras at the press site, headed in the direction it would need to be in order to head to Roberts Road. This capsule could very well have been C209, which had recently supported the CRS-30 mission and was likely headed to Hangar X2 for refurbishment and processing for its next flight. Additionally, on May 22nd, we saw what could have been a Crew Dragon capsule going the other way from the direction of the Roberts Road facility, past NASA's VAB and off toward one of the launch pads. This may have very well been Resilience, the Crew Dragon capsule for Polaris Dawn, being transported over from Hangar X2 to either LC-39A or SLC-40. Hangar X2 is soon to become even more active, as it seems SpaceX has quickly built up the north extension of the building. Although some more outfitting work may seem like it's still needed, this extension seems to be structurally completed and most of the outer wall panels are installed as well. This section of the building is planned to be used as part of Starship's heat shield manufacturing and production facility. Places like this are often nicknamed by SpaceX as the bakery. The new bakery will likely replace the already existing facility at SpaceX's Citgo Road facility in Cocoa, a few dozen miles south here on the Space Coast. This is all part of the consolidation of activities at Roberts Road, as SpaceX ramps up its work here. However, in order for that to materialize, SpaceX will need to expand Roberts Road. As we mentioned last year, the company had asked for an extension of this facility to the north. Since then, an environmental review has been kickstarted and is underway. Fast forward to the current date, and we now have a finding of no significant impact, or FONSI for short, saying that such an expansion of Roberts Road will not significantly impact the environment whenever it's completed. Additionally, on this flyover, we have this really weird black square on the ground right next to the water tanks up to the north. We initially had no idea what it was, so we had to look up permitting and other documentation. This location is marked as 90-day hazardous waste storage, which is not a lot of detail, but good enough to know it's probably not terribly exciting. Something a bit more interesting, however, were these tanks that have popped up at Roberts Road south of where these Starship tower segments were built. If you're a regular follower of Starbase Live, this hardware might seem familiar to you, as these were previously installed at the suborbital tank farm at Starbase. For whatever reason, it seems like SpaceX has thought that these were more useful in Florida than back at Starbase. So now they're here. Now, on a more somber note, the remains of booster B1058 and the tent that we're covering it outside of Hangar X are now gone. For those new here, B-1058 was the booster that had unfortunately toppled over on the drone ship and broken up during its journey home to port back in December of 2023. Well, last year. Feels like a lot longer than that for some reason. The remains were sent here to Roberts Road and had been inspected and dismantled over time. So I guess we can finally say our last goodbyes to the best booster and the worm logo. Rest in peace, B-1058. Now that we have Roberts Road pretty much covered, I'm going to throw you guys over to Adrian to talk us more about what's happening with Blue Origin and ULA at their various facilities around here at the Cape. Adrian?
Over at ULA Space Launch Complex 41, we can see what appears to be Vulcan's mobile launch platform out on the pad. It's likely that the ML is out there due to the Atlas ML being inside the VIF ahead of the USSF-51 mission, which is currently planned to launch on July 30. On July 8, ULA posted that the Atlas V first stage, 5 solid rocket boosters and the Centaur had been integrated in preparation for the launch. Slightly further south, we can see work ongoing at ULA's Spaceflight Processing and Operations Center, known as SPOC. I would make a cheap Star Trek joke here, but I don't know Star Trek. Moving down to the south end of the Cape, we can check out Blue Origin's Launch Complex 36, which has been rather busy since our last flight. We are able to spot the empty New Glenn transporter erector lying horizontal at the launch pad. This follows Blue conducting several retraction tests of the TE while it had the New Glenn simulator on board. The tests, which took place in early July, demonstrated both smaller and larger retraction tests of the TE away from the rocket. In this case, the simulator mimics what will happen during the final stages of the countdown before a New Glenn launch. Following the last of these retraction tests, the New Glenn simulator stood vertical at the pad without the support of the TE for the first time. On July 3rd, Blue Origin shared that they had successfully tested the rapid retract system yesterday, simulating disconnect during a New Glenn launch. Blue's CEO David Limb also posted some more details about this testing milestone, stating, "Pulling the TE back that quickly requires approximately 5 million pounds of force before those same cylinders reverse and apply 3 million pounds of force to then stop it at our target angle." Following the completion of these tests, Blue lowered the simulator back to horizontal and rolled it back into the hangar. But you may be thinking, if Blue completed the testing with the TE, then why is it back at the pad empty? Well, hold that thought. Down by the hangar, there's an empty space where the smaller second stage transporter erector is usually stored. As a quick reminder, the second stage TE is expected to be used for testing New Glenn second stages on the launch pad ahead of being integrated with the first stages for flight. It could be possible that Blue may have rolled the second stage TE inside of the hangar in preparation for second stage testing ahead of New Glenn's first launch campaign. To add to this, on July 9, David Lim shared a photo of a New Glenn second stage in the factory with its 2 BE-3U engines installed. Next to the launch pad at LC-36, we can clearly see a New Glenn first stage engine section on a test stand. Also seen in the TE retraction test footage released by Blue, this hardware appears to be undergoing some sort of testing in the lead up to the rocket's first flight. Just before our flyover, Blue submitted permitting documents to replace Hangar O, a historic hangar which sits just across the road from LC-36 southern entrance. The permit application states that Blue aims to demolish the existing 8,500 square feet building and replace it with a larger 9,200 square feet hangar, as well as the addition of the construction of a new dry retention pond. Continuing with Blue's plans for more facilities, new documents submitted in late June show the company's latest plan for the southern side of its campus, located at Exploration Park. New additions include a maintenance support facility, stage storage facility, a test processing area, spinform facility, payload fairing building, and more. The building that we have known as the Reef Pathfinder building is now labeled as a light industrial building. Next to that, where the vertical assembly area is currently located, will become home to the spinform facility. During our flight, we can actually see the structure at the vertical assembly area being disassembled. And just north of there, we finally get a look at the planned footprint of the Lunar Production Facility, which is referred as Lunar Plant 1 in these documents. And we can see the foundation for this facility coming along really well. This building will be an integral part of Blue's lunar ambitions, especially with an Artemis contract already signed. The new parking garage also has foundations on the way. While not the most exciting construction, this is an incredibly important part of the Blue campus. As the already extensive facilities continue to grow, so will the workforce, and having a good location for employees and contractors to park will be something much appreciated. Especially as more large hardware moves around between the buildings. While we weren't lucky enough to catch any rocket hardware outside this time, we did manage to see 2 transporter rigs outside of the main factory building. Judging by the size of these rings, it could be possible that one of them will be moving the New Glenn second stage that we mentioned earlier out to Launch Complex 36 ahead of final pre-flight testing. Also at Exploration Park is the Airbus OneWeb facility, which since our last flyover has seen significant progress on its expansion, with most, if not all of the new walls in place, and preparations for roof to be added underway. This 49,000 square feet expansion will allow the factory to meet increased demand for satellites from all customers. Now I'll hand it over to Alex with some exciting news for Blue Origin's recovery fleet and what is going on at SpaceX Launchpad.
You heard Adrian right, there's going to be a Blue Origin recovery fleet, and that'll be over there in the future. Right now there's no recovery fleet, but there'll be, and we've actually seen some activity like that in the last couple of months. In case you missed it, Gavin Conwell actually spotted back in May the landing platform vessel 1, which is New Glenn's drone ship recovery vessel. That's going to be where all of these boosters are going to be landing on. And right now it is not here at the Cape, it is currently in France, in Brest. That drone ship is currently there because it was built in Europe, but soon it will come here to Port Canaveral. And in order to do that, it'll need another vessel, which is called Harvey Stone. Harvey Stone arrived back in June. It soon seemed very clear what it was for because, well, containers started appearing on its deck that had Blue Origin name on it. While we wait for Blue Origin to actually bring all of those recovery assets here to Port Canaveral, there's a rare sight behind me, which is all of these SpaceX recovery assets are here at port. That is not an usual thing. And unfortunately, that is because Falcon 9 flights are now grounded after a failure of the Starlink Group 9-3 mission back earlier this week, essentially, from Vandenberg. When our team actually was flying over here, they spotted B-1076. That was the booster from the last successful flight of a Falcon 9, which was Turksat 6A. I actually was there in person to watch that launch, by the way. But other than that, after just a few days after that failure, all of the recovery assets came back home, including a shuttle of Gravitas, which actually had head out for another Starlink launch as usual. In the meantime, though, there's news about SpaceX's recovery vessels because now we have another new one, which is called Go Cosmos. The first sign that it was a SpaceX boat was that it had a fast boat with the SpaceX logo on it right next to Go Cosmos. So that kind of gave it away as well. Then after that, we saw a fairing, a Falcon 9 fairing being loaded onto the ship, and then it went out to do sea trials. So yeah, let's say that it's very solid now that it is a SpaceX recovery vessel, probably for fairings. Now, why would it be here at the Cape? They already have Doug and Bob out here. Well, there's potentially a theory here, which is that it might be actually for Vandenberg, and it is right here right now just for sea trials and sort of like figuring out how to use it in the meantime, and then it'll head out to Vandenberg to be able to be used for the West Coast. The other theory could be that they have so much activity here at Florida and they plan to launch so much from here that they really need a third fairing recovery vessel to be able to support all of that. Let's go to Launch Complex 39A, where in our flyover we spotted the transporter reactor for Falcon 9 being worked on. The last launch out of 39A was a Falcon Heavy carrying NOAA's GOES-U satellite, so of course, if they want to launch a Falcon 9 out of there, they need to convert back to a Falcon 9 configuration. In fact, SpaceX was gearing up for a Starlink launch out of 39A just next week, but you know, with the whole grounding thing, that might not happen for a while. Despite that, there's still work to be done and even more activity to be performed on 39A. In fact, just as I'm recording, SpaceX is testing the Transporter Director of 39A. It appears they're testing the new hardware for the Intuitive Machines Nova C lander. That's essentially the plumbing that loads liquid methane and liquid oxygen onto that lander so that then it can, well, land on the moon. SpaceX already supported a launch of that lander back in February, and another one is expected towards the end of the year. So it's kind of makes sense to test that hardware in between. Another bit of hardware that they may be testing soon at 39A will be the liquid oxygen tank farm, which has been expanded with new tanks, and well, from the latest flyover pictures, it seems like they have already been installed. Now, talking about Starship, we also got to know more information about what it will look like once it's actually fully built out at LC-39A. Among those things was a Starship catch tower. Where have I heard that before? So unlike at Starbase, yeah, 39A will have its own catch tower. We really don't know what is the purpose of just having one catch tower for just catching. My opinion is that if it were just for safety, well, they shouldn't just build anything at 39A in the first place and go to Slick 37. Yeah, so if you're also under a rock, Space Launch Complex 37 will also be another Starship launch pad, at least if it gets approved for that. And during this flyover, we actually saw a clearing west to that launch pad, which may or may not be related with the SpaceX, but we'll definitely keep an eye on that just in case. We also got to know in the last couple of months that apparently SpaceX wants to launch from there 76 times, yes, 76 times every year with a Starship. So those 76 plus the 44 from 39A, that's 120 launches. But guess what? SpaceX is also asking for more launches out of Starbase, up to 25, which means 145 launches of a Starship every year. That's crazy. Now, while all of that will happen in the future with the Starship and all of the active launch pads, right now the most active launch pad in the world is Slick 40. That launch pad is so busy that you wouldn't think SpaceX will have any time to really add anything new to it, but in fact, they actually did add more things to it. Since early June, it appears that SpaceX has had what appears to be new vaporizers and new tanks on the northeast side of Slick 40, and we actually spotted that on our latest flyover. Now, in a lot of these aerial shots that we've taken, you might have spotted a really big building, black and white building, that is near Slick 40. No, that is not the VAV or anything like it. That is actually SpaceX's payload processing facility. That building is located about a mile south of Slick 40, and soon it will get a new extension. While Falcon 9 is currently grounded, SpaceX plans to launch tons and tons of times, and that includes, of course, a lot of customer missions. So it is because of that that SpaceX is now having a new project called Titan Road Office Building, which will be actually for customers. This customer office building will also have its own parking lot and even a place to have a food truck. They tend to love a lot food trucks around here. So yeah, hopefully Falcon 9 returns to flight. I actually came here to watch more launches, and suddenly, well, there's no more launches. You know, another place where we're gonna see a lot of rockets, that's on the other launch pads, that's gonna be Max covering all those, so I'll hand it over to Max.
At Relativity's Launch Complex 16, we can see that the large-scale project of converting the pad from supporting Terran 1 to Terran R continues to be well underway. The most obvious thing to note here are the cranes out where Terran R's launch pad will be constructed. These cranes appear to be either drilling or driving piles to support the foundations of the new launch pad. Satellite images from earlier in July help show the scale of the area that will now support the infrastructure for Terran R, and a much larger hangar, of course, and of course the tank farms. Now, just 2 facilities south of Relativity is Launch Complex 14, which will soon be home to Stoke Space's Nova rocket, hopefully in the near future. Stoke had been undergoing an environmental assessment of the site to reactivate and utilize it with the aim of launching no earlier than next year. Back in May, Stoke finally received a FONSI, or again, finding of no significant impact, by the US Space Force, stating that once built, the launch pad will not significantly impact the environment around it. This FONSI was released along with a lengthy and nearly 700-page long environmental assessment for Stoke's planned activities at LC-14, as there's quite a lot to unpack. The document goes into great detail about the rocket's basic proportions, mass, and thrust. It also details the new launch pad's outline with all of the new commodities and for what the rocket's operations will look like. LC-14 will have a horizontal integration facility with a payload processing building attached next to it. Stoke's Nova rocket will be integrated on a transporter erector, just like Falcon 9, and then rolled out onto the pad to be rotated vertically into position for pre-launch testing and eventually flight. The launch pad will have room for 3 propellants used on Nova, which are liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, and of course, liquefied natural gas to be used on the first stage. This launch site will also get its very own set of catenary towers and supporting wires for lightning protection. God, I can already hear all the questions coming in about what do the 4 towers do? What do the 4 towers do? We'll get to that. The document states that the initial flights of this rocket will be done in an expendable manner, and recovery will be pursued once the rocket's technology is proven. According to this lengthy document, Stoke intends to fly Nova at least 2 times in 2025, with cadence likely increasing to 10 launches per year in 2026 and 2027. Up at the Launch and Landing Facility, Amazon's Kuiper Payload Processing Facility, or PPF, is looking far more complete externally. At just over 100,000 square feet, this building will support the pre-launch processing and encapsulation of Amazon's Kuiper Internet satellites ahead of launch from KSC or Capeside. Many of the bridge cranes which were set outside have now disappeared, which leads us to believe that they have been installed inside of the facility. It hopefully won't be too long until we start seeing payload fairings and satellites visiting this site. Progress also continues at the construction site of the Mobile Launcher 2 platform for NASA's SLS rocket. We can now see a lot more steel has gone into the base of the platform, and lots of scaffolding is present. We can also see a lot of plumbing staged nearby for an eventual installation on the platform. ML1 is still hard down at LC-39B, undergoing proof testing to certify its readiness to serve the next SLS rocket for arguably the most important mission so far this decade, Artemis 2. Hopefully coming in September of 2025, but time will tell. We know it's been a while, and we know there's been a ton to cover, so we appreciate you sticking with us. There is non-stop 24/7 activity happening here at KSC and also at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, so we are always keeping our eyes peeled for any more changes for what's to come. And we'll be sure to keep you updated as well. Thanks so much everybody for tuning in for this month's Flyover. Until next time, I'm Max Evans for NSF. Peace out, Girl Scouts.